G'day everybody, welcome back to the channel. Okay, so this is a bit overdue and I apologise for that, but I dropped the mid-range tracks in the critical listening series that I'm doing. I did the intro while I was in Manila, in Greenbelt, in the garden there. This is the results for that video and the explanations around what you should be listening for in mid-range. So let's talk a little bit about mid-range first before we get into, individually talking about each track. Good mid-range is the selling of vocalists, and most of the things that we hear in our sound system are in the mid-range. Voices, most instruments are in that mid-range band, and if your mid-range isn't set up correctly or isn't where you would want it to be, it's going to sound like you're listening to a sound system rather than listening to people in your room singing to you or playing instruments to you. When you get it locked in and get it right, picking the right electronics, the right speaker system, whatever the case may be, you should feel a sense of realism, and that crops up in some of the notes that I've written here about each of these tracks. So at the risk of repeating myself, let's get into talking about mid-range and what you should be listening for in those 5 short videos that I dropped around 2 weeks or so ago. There is a playlist for critical listening. I've dropped 5 videos or 5 short videos and the introduction and explanation on bass. This is the explanation for mid-range, and then I'll go into high frequency, and then we'll also have a look at soundstage and imaging. And if I can come up with anything else that I think is helpful in this series, I'll add that as well. So let's get into mid-range. So track 1 was an orchestral choir piece. It's one I use quite a bit for gauging, again, that sense of realism in the vocal. Now on this one, you're listening for that real humanity in the voice, that human aspect of each of the vocalists in that choir. And you should be able to hear them individually across the soundstage when you close your eyes. And they should have a real sense of them being in the room if the mid-range is really right. I've written a note here that at around 1:15 in this piece, there is a voice that soars above the rest of the choir. And in my system, and essentially to you, it should come out in front of the choir and almost float in the air around the choir. It always gives me goosebumps when I hear that piece in around 1:15 when the female vocalist just lifts her voice above the rest of the choir, and it just is beautifully recorded in a church, and you can hear the atmosphere of that particular piece and the room around the space in which that was recorded in. So that's also a really important thing to listen out for and see if you can feel that vocally as I've described it. Now, of course, the voices are what really need to be tuned in properly for mid-range. If you've got that vocal presentation, as I said before, sounding real to you, then you've got your mid-range right. You've got that balance right. It's about speaker placement. It's also about the correct speaker for your room. It's also about the components you are selecting. All of this is a synergy that must come together to make that system give you that sense of realism around the recordings. But these are the things that you should be listening for in as far as critically listening to a speaker, critically listening to an electronic component you're considering buying. This is your cheat sheet, if you like, your way of going, right now, Shane said to listen for that in that area. So you might want to use these tracks. They're all in my reference list of tracks that I use. So you might want to remember what they were and ask somebody at an audition to play these tracks for you, and then remember what what I'm describing to you, and see if you feel that same sensation around those recordings. That's also really important. So that's pretty much track 1. Now track 2. Now this one is an absolute cracker. It is, again, not in English. The first 2 tracks are other languages, so I don't understand exactly what's being said. But this particular track is called Volver, and it is literally the emotion in this female vocalist's voice just absolutely comes out at you in the recording. You can tell she is emotionally engaged in what she's singing about. Some of the things that you should be listening for in this track is the timbre in the guitar. There is literally 3 instruments here if you class the female vocalist as one. There is an acoustic guitar being played and a muted trumpet. They are the only 3 instruments that you will hear in this recording because there's nothing else there. The room is another thing. When she sings, when she projects that voice out, when she's singing with all that emotion, you can hear the reverb around the tracking room or wherever that's being recorded. You can absolutely appreciate the space in the recording. That should be evident when you listen back to it. So timbre in the guitar, absolutely one thing. The stridency of the trumpet. Now I hear people talking about a trumpet should sound sweet. If a trumpet sounds sweet, you're getting second and third harmonic distortion. You're hearing tubes. You're hearing something added to the presentation. Now, this could be controversial to people, but it's simply a fact. As a tracking engineer, I have heard trumpet after trumpet after trumpet. And if somebody plays a trumpet and you are anywhere within about 10 or 15 feet of it, it should cut your head off. It is literally a strident instrument. It pierces through the air. And there is stridency in the way this muted trumpet, now this trumpet is being played with a mute, so it is pulled back, but it still has a sharpness. It shouldn't be offensive in the right system. It should sound real. And a real sound of a trumpet is a strident, piercing sound. And that's what you hear in this recording. But in that as well, there is a sense of sweetness around the presentation. But an overly sweet sounding trumpet is just not real. You're hearing something that's being added into the recording through your system. Second and third harmonic distortions often create a fuzzy warmth that is often known around tube-like equipment. And that is unfortunately not real. It's not how a trumpet sounds in real life. So that is something you hear in this track. There's a cut through in that trumpet. It cuts into the recording. It's never offensive. You should just hear it in there, and it should grab your attention immediately when it's being played. Now, the emotion in her voice, now I know I've spoken about this, but that is just something, it's probably one of the tracks I've got in my reference library of tracks where she's almost crying as she's singing this. There's so much emotion. Listen for that, because that's, again, giving you a sense of the mid-range being right, being able to hear all that emotion in her breath, in her the way she sings that track. As I said before, and I'll mention it again, when she lifts her voice and she gets powerful and gets really engaged in the next part of that vocal presentation, you can hear the reverb in the room. You can hear exactly where where they're playing, and that's another thing that's really important. So that's track 2. Let's go over the page here and have a look at track 3. Okay, so track 3. Again, it's another a cappella piece, just human voices, which is what I use for mid-range. This particular track, again, not in English. Don't know what the hell they're singing about, but it is what it is. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful studio recording. And what you should be listening for here is the vocalist separation. So separation between each of the voices. the men doing the bass notes in this particular track, the females doing their part of the mid-range. There is a real sense of individuality in the voices. You should be able to focus in on that and hear that. I certainly can in my system. The track vocally is right smack bang in the mid-band range, and that's I've written that here, and that's in my reference notes for this particular track. So, they should sound real. They should sound like they're there in the room. If the mid-range is right, there will be that sense of realism. I keep banging on about it, but it really is one of the things you've got to listen for when you're auditioning a pair of speakers or auditioning an amplifier. Listen for that realness in the presentation around the mid-range. There should be reality there. You should be able to hear. So that pretty much covers track 3. Now, track 4 is a beautiful, beautiful Blue Note recording, Never Can Say Goodbye, which I think was a Jackson 5 track. So there should be sweet wooden timbre in the acoustic guitar here. You should and that's one of the things that really stands out in this recording to me. I really hear that mid-band acoustic guitar. I hear the woodenness, the sweetness of the guitar, the sweetness of that, of the gentle aspect of the warmth of that guitar is really evident in the recording. So listen for that. That's a very important thing to listen to. And then good mid-range will bring a sense of reality to the presentation. And I keep saying that, and that's what it is. You will hear that in her voice. Wonderful vocalist. You really do. You can hear the air past her vocal cords. You can feel the purposeful strain she puts in her voice when she pitches notes. You should be listening for that and being able to clearly hear that in the recording of the track. And the last one, and it's about as mid-range as you get. This is a 1964 recording of Peggy Lee doing Fever. And I have got to tell you, for a recording of that age, being recorded all on analog, there is zero compression in that recording. It is just how a vocalist should sound. There is one of the other things that you should listen for in that track. Well, first of all, it's the sweetness in her voice. Her voice just floats in the air. It has a real ease about it, a real sweetness in her presentation of that track. There's percussive things, drum strikes and things. And in this recording, and I also use this recording for soundstage depth, because those percussion sections in that track, in my room, sound like they're coming from the room behind the speakers. There's a real depth in the recording, and that goes into a different area that we'll touch on later in this series. But in this track, you do get that sense of depth in the soundstage. So a little footnote and something maybe to listen for as well, if you're looking at doing that. We'll go into that with more tracks later on in the series. But that's the sort of things you should be listening for there. I keep banging on about it, and I'll say it one more time. You want that humanity. You want that sense of realism in the vocal. You want that sense of realism in everything in the mid-range. And most of what we listen to in an audio system is in the mid-range. Mid-range is super important to get right. It really is. Bass is difficult to get right. Mid-range is the most important frequency to get right. If you got your mid-range right, then you're sold on those performances. They sound like they're in the room with you. They should. And if the mid-range is right, that's what you'll hear about it. So go away, have a listen to the tracks again. Please comment below. Let me know how you found those recordings again, and whether you were hearing some of the things that I'm talking about, the cues, those audible cues you should be listening for. I'll be really interested to hear what you've got to say. We'll move on to the next episode of this series, which is high frequency, and we'll do five shorts for that one. That'll be coming up soon. And all I can ask you to do is give this a thumbs up if you're enjoying this kind of stuff. It's me giving you a little bit of education around my 35 years of experience doing this. I want to pass it on. I want to educate as many people in this hobby as I can. I am only one perspective, of course, and I don't expect everybody to agree with my opinion. But it simply is mine, and you're watching my channel, so I assume you have are placing some weight in my opinion, and I appreciate that. I appreciate every single one of you. We're getting close to 2,000 subscribers now in about 7 months of me starting this channel. So I am grateful to all of you. You are all part of an Aussie audiophile family, and I cherish every one of you, and I thank you all very much for your support. And we will be very much talking soon with the next part of this series, which is high frequency. Until then, bye for now.